Ishvare kartruta buddhihi satkopa deyatantime swakarma parinamascha shastra sarartha uchyate. This is the summary shloka for the 18th chapter. Now we are at a very important juncture in our journey of the 18th chapter. So what I thought was, it would be a good idea to try out a different mode of an engagement with you all. So what we are going to do is a kind of a reflection on the art and science of actions. It's going to be a reflection that will cover right from Shloka 18 to Shloka 39, where Krishna, in a great detail, covered the art and science of right actions. Of course, we are not going to go into the depth of what we discussed over several weeks, but I thought it would be a good refresher for us to visually look at some concepts, some principles that we discussed at length, which would then help us to move on to the next segment of the chapter. Ishvare kartruta buddhihi sattvopa deyatantime swakarma parinamascha. The swakarma parinamascha is the very important topic. Parinama, transformation. How do we transform every action that we do into a liberating action? This is the essence of Gita. Because by design, we act. There is no escaping the fact that we are all designed to carry out actions, be it physical or mental. So therefore, if we are designed as humans to carry out actions all the time, and if actions by design are binding in nature, because every action has a consequence, and the consequence in the form of karma phala and karma vasana are going to bind us to samsara, then the natural question to ask is, what is the way out? If we are designed to keep acting, and if by design every action is binding in nature, then we continue to be in a vicious cycle forever. So therefore, throughout the Gita, the underlying topic that Krishna continues to build on right from the 2nd chapter right up to the 18th chapter is the topic of how to do right actions. What is the right action? The right action is an action which is liberating in nature. That is the way we need to understand. At a very superficial level, yes, right action and wrong action, we can interpret them as based on morality, based on ethics, what is good, what is not good. But ultimately, a right action is that action which is liberating in nature. So therefore, Krishna takes up everything that he discussed on Karma Yoga and addresses Arjuna's fundamental question. Fundamental question is, hey Krishna, what is my dharma? What is that I have to do? What is the right thing to do? So we see between Shlokas 18 to 39, we saw how Krishna takes up action and then blows it into various components and analyzes them in so very detail. So he first takes up what are its components. Krishna is so methodical that he actually drills down into what the action and gives us a complete view of the various components of the action. What are the various components? Jnanam, Jneyam, Parijnata, Karanam, Karma, Karta. Maybe very familiar terms. Few months back, we discussed them in detail. Now, out of these 6 components, we can classify them into 2 groups. The first group of Jnanam, Jneyam, Parijnata are the 3 factors which impel one to act. That which induce one to act, the stimulators for any action. Any action happens because of these 3 factors. Jnanam, Jneyam, Parijnata. Jnanam, knowledge. Jneyam, object of knowledge. Parijnata, the knower. These 3 are important. They are the stimulators. They induce an action to be performed. The Parijnata, the knower, perceives an object, which is Jneyam. When I engage with the world, I am induced to perform any kind of action. Even a mental action is because of my engagement with the world. When my indriyas engage with the world, the result is either a physical action or a mental action. So these are the 3 factors which induce any action to be performed. Then there are 3 factors which actually execute the action. Inducers, executors. To execute an action, we need our sense organs, the indriyas, the jnanendriyas and the karmendriyas, with which we carry out the actions. And then there is the karta. The Atman is the karta. The Atman has to will to perform an action. If the Atman doesn't dwell in the body, there is no action at all. So Atman is very much the executor here. And then there is the physical action itself, which is the karma. Now, these 6 components together need to be understood because each of them influence the nature of the action. No, we need to keep constantly asking this question every time, whatever we go throughout this chapter. Why are we discussing this? What is our goal? Our goal is to understand right action. Our goal is to understand what is liberating in nature. Ultimately, that's the goal. So this is the reason why Krishna is actually going into the minutest details of an action, so that we have the big picture of how every component here can actually be tailored and transformed in such a way that eventually all these cogs in a wheel will come together so that the wheel of life can roll on the road of sattva and eventually attain liberation. Right? So, how does an action take birth? The birth of any action. Now, this essentially we took these 6 components here and we can rearrange them to understand how typically an action takes birth. Again, we are seeing the same 6, but slightly rearranged for better understanding. Jneyam, the objects of the world. The objects of the world, either they are outside or they are inside. We need to understand this. Because why? Sometimes we may say the objects of the world are outside. Now, if we shut ourselves from them, will there be no actions? There will still be actions because the objects of the world are also sitting inside my mind as impressions in my mind. So I may shut them out, but I cannot shut them out of my mind. So when we say Jneyam as objects of the world are outside and are also inside. And they are the major inducers for any action. It is the engagement with these objects of the world that the actions take birth. The objects of the world are then interacting with our sense organs, which are dutifully opened to the world to bring anything and everything from outside to inside. Our sense organs do one job, very, very well. Whatever is there outside is brought inside completely. And many a times, our mind also goes the extra mile to ensure that the unwanted things are stored very carefully also. That also happens. Now, the process of perception, perceiving the outside world, happens through the sense organs. Now, when perception happens, the parignyata, the knower who knows, what is knowing? Knowing here is a general term for everything in terms of engagement. Seeing is also knowing at the end of the day. So the knower essentially, through the sense organs, is receiving the stimulus from the world. Now, something very interesting happens here. This is where jnanam plays a very important role. Knowledge plays a very important role because you and I may see the same thing, but what is once seen, the object, when it is stored, may be completely stored and in a different way with a different meaning. We all experience this ourselves. The same thing can invoke a different reaction in me, a different reaction in you. Why is that? The same laddu, again going back to my favorite example, the same laddu can invoke joy in me, aversion in somebody. Why? Because there is this jnanam which is assigning a meaning to everything that is perceived. So depending on the knowledge that one possesses, everything that is perceived is nicely labeled, if you were to use the term. It is labeled, a meaning is given. Unless a meaning is given, the processing is not complete. So we process, the process of whatever stimulus we get gets completed through jnana. So jnanam plays a very, very important role. Depending on the nature of the jnana, depending on how expansive it is, how constricted it is, what we perceive gets processed. The parignyata is the knower. Then, now later we will see how the knower and the doer are one and the same. But for the sake, Krishna nicely begins by breaking down the components. So he breaks the knower separately, the doer separately as well. But parignyata, the knower, what does he do? Once an object is perceived, it is processed, a meaning is given, then immediately the knower transforms the responsibility to the doer. Now it is the responsibility of the doer to take up, and the doer then immediately engages the karanam, the instruments which are to execute the action. The karanam are engaged and a karma is performed. So for a karma, an action to be performed, we see how the process goes. And now, when the karma is performed, the karma that is performed then also has a result. Now, the result is the experience of performing the karma. Therefore, the doer also becomes the experiencer. The karta also is the bhokta. Now, the karta and the bhokta who experiences, the experience also consists of the vasana and the phala. And where do these vasana and phala go? They once again go back to the parignyata, the knower, and the impressions in the mind are changed. Therefore, the karma that is performed also in a way impacts the karta, who is the bhokta, the parignyata, and the jnanam as well. So knowledge which impels the action in a way also gets impacted when the action is done by the consequence of the action, because knowledge is also dynamic, doesn't remain static. The impressions that we accumulate, the experiences that we go through, all of them in turn go back and impact the nature of knowledge. So therefore, it is a vicious cycle. Desires, mental agitations, actions, vasanas. This is a vicious cycle which keeps going on and on and on. So the desires belong to the parignyata. The mental agitations belong to the karta and the bhokta. The actions, the karma, result in vasanas. The vasanas impact the way the jnana is shaped. The way the jnana is shaped impacts the desires of the karta, and the way the desires are impacted will once again result in the way the actions are shaped. The cycle goes on and on. Now, Krishna then takes the next step, and he says, while there are these 6 factors, 6 components in any action, let us identify the real actors in any action. Who are the real actors? When we say actors, the reason why he further zooms in, some of these components can be changed, some of them cannot be changed. Some of them can be transformed, some of them cannot be transformed. Jneyam, object of the world. I cannot change the world. We all think we can change the world. But the world is given. The world is given. The change is the way I engage with the world. The change is within me, not with the world. The nature of the world can never be changed. I may dream that everything will remain the same in this world, but nothing remains the same. I may dream that eternally everything will last. It's not going to happen. So therefore, the objects of the world cannot be changed. So there is no point in trying to analyze them too much. They're important, but Krishna says, let's keep them aside for a while. Then Karanam. Karanam are sense organs. Now, sense organs belong to this body. And once we take birth in this life, the body is given. The body is given. The physical, we are talking about the physical body and the physical senses. So therefore, that also Krishna takes aside and says, let's keep them aside. So that brings us to the rest of the components, jnanam, parignyata, karta and karma. Parignyata and karta are one and the same. It is the jivatma, the indweller in the body. So thus, the principal actors in any action who can be transformed are these 3. So, and every action is a result of a choice making. And the factors which can be transformed in the process of choice making are these 3. So thus, from 6 components that Krishna starts off with, he boils down to 3. The 3 being jnanam, karma, karta. And Krishna says, all these 3 play a very important role in the actions that we do. Every action is a result of a choice that we make. And therefore, to understand the dynamics of how the action, we need to understand how jnanam works, how karma works, and how karta works. And all these 3 are not independent. They are integrated and working together. But he takes up each one of them and analyzes them based on the 3 gunas so that we understand how we can eventually travel on the road of sattva. That's the whole idea. The whole idea is cultivating sattva guna is so very important. Why? Because jnana becomes sattva, karma becomes sattva, karta becomes sattva, then we are on the road of sattva, which is the only way to exit, to convert the vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle and eventually exit even the virtuous cycle. The idea is not to remain in the virtuous cycle. The idea is to convert it to virtuous cycle. In a virtuous cycle, what is a virtuous cycle? A sattvic cycle, where everything is sattvic. But even sattva is binding in nature. But the beauty of sattva is it reveals us the path. When it is a vicious cycle, the path outside of the cycle is not known. We are lost. But it is a virtuous cycle. We can see the path outside and we can take that path. That's the difference. So, jnanam, karma, karta. All three are then analyzed based on three gunas. Krishna then takes up jnanam. Also in jnanam, we need to understand that Krishna does not deal with all three kinds of jnana in his analysis. There is a reason for that. Now, what are the three types of jnana that we discussed? Jnana can be primarily of three types, which is pratyaksha, anumana, shabdha. Shabdha is scriptural knowledge. Now, Krishna has already established the significance of the Shastra and the Shraddha in Shastra. And he is also, in the 17th chapter, also talks about the classification also based on that. So therefore, he once again does not take it up in the 18th chapter here. Anumana, inference. Pratyaksha is the perceptual knowledge. So here in the context of analyzing right actions, Krishna takes up pratyaksha jnana, perceptual knowledge. Knowledge that is involved in dealing with the world, engaging with the world. And it is this knowledge which can be of three types: Sattvika, Rajasika, and Tamasika. So Sattvika knowledge, Rajasika knowledge, and Tamasika knowledge, Tamasika jnana. While Krishna goes Sattvika, Rajasika, and Tamasika, let's go a little bit the other way around so that it becomes important for us as to why Sattvika jnana is necessary for us on this road of spiritual progress. Tamasika jnana. When there is jnana, knowledge which is tamasic in nature, we can possibly say we have an identity crisis. No, all of us need to ask this question to ourselves. We need to self-reflect. Do we have an identity crisis or do we not? Now, the answer is not straightforward. We may all think, what identity crisis we have? We are all very clear. I am so and so. This is my name. This is the work that I do. This is where I live. This is the family I belong to. This is where I come from. The very fact that we are saying all of this means we have an identity crisis. This is what Krishna called, the tamasic guna is responsible for ignorance of our ignorance. So the unfortunate part of tamasic jnana is there is an identity crisis which is not known. That is the danger. The danger is not the identity crisis. The awareness of identity crisis is in fact welcome, because when there is awareness of the identity crisis, which means we are on the right path. At least our direction is right. But lack of awareness of the identity crisis is a fundamental problem. So therefore, tamasic jnana is so very dangerous. And what is tamasic jnana? Tamasic jnana is essentially focused on only one thing: my body. Nothing else matters. Which means it is essentially the jnana which animals have. So it is very delusory in nature. It is very destructive in nature. Why? Because the moment I do not recognize any other entity other than my own physical body, then any action I do will be destructive, will be harmful in nature. And it is responsible for the lack of sense of perspective and proportion. The perspective is so very constricted. Not only I am at the center of the world, I am the world. I am the world and nothing else matters. So therefore, that's why Krishna uses some words. Ahaitukam, atatvartavad, alpam. Alpam means a fragment. which means reality is so vast. Tamasic jnana, instead of looking at the vastness of reality, is just looking at a very, very, very small fragment, a fragment of reality which is even irrelevant. It is, there is this famous saying which says, missing the forest for the tree. It is, you're missing the big picture to such a large extent that you're focusing on alpa, which is this body, which is not even going to exist after a few years. And when that body, which has almost no existence in the overall scheme of things, if that is the focus, obviously, then one has got a completely disproportionate sense of what this reality is all about. So it's like an insect which is dreaming of living for 10 days. An insect which is about to jump into a fire is looking at the fire and says, happy days are here again. It's looking at fibers in darkness and says, I'm going to live happily for 10 days. Insect is thinking for 10 days. For insect, it's 10 days. For humans, possibly it is 1,000 years. So that is the loss of sense of perspective. That is tamasic jnana, identity crisis. Ahaitukam, which means the causelessness, which anything which is being done, because why? The knowledge is so very perverted. So there is no reason that can be attributed to any action. Atattvavarthavat. Tattva is reality. Tattva is truth. When there is no knowledge of truth, then atattvavarthavat. Everything, this jnana will, the one with the tamasic jnana is looking at the world in a completely perverse way. Everything turned upside down. Rajasic jnana. The moment we say rajas, lobhaha, pravrittirarambaha, karmana, ashamasriha. All these are important adjectives for rajas. Rajasyetani jayante vivriddhe bharatarshava. Lobha, greed. Pravrittihi, activity with no productivity. Pravritti is not just activity. Activity with no productivity. Selfishness, discontent, asamaha. There is always that sense of incompleteness and desire prompted actions. Rajasic jnana. Also, what Rajasic jnana does is it basically takes the diversity and one concludes that diversity alone is truth. One cannot recognize the underlying unity amidst all diversity. And Rajasic jnana is responsible for greed. Why? It is because of Rajasic jnana, we all think we are independent entities. The greater the Rajasic jnana, greater is the belief that we are all independent entities. The moment we are independent, which means then I need to keep taking more and more. Why? Because I am independent. If I know that I am not independent, and if I am connected to the source all the time, I'm not so much worried. Because I know I have the source from where I can get whenever I want. But the moment I know that I'm independent, so which means my connection from the source is gone. So I have to survive on my own. Everything is scarce. Scarcity mentality, which means automatically greed becomes my DNA. So rajas and greed go together all the time. And when there is greed, when it is greed, the rajasic jnana, then everything in this world is essentially all about I win, you lose. That's basically becomes the paradigm. So that's the nature of rajasic jnana. Sattvic jnana, therefore, is important for the right actions. What is sattvic jnana? Krishna uses three important adjectives for sattvic jnana. Avibhaktam, avyayam, ekabhavam. Wonderful words to really remember. Some of these words we need to remember even though they are in Sanskrit because they give us the very essence straight away with one word. Avibhaktam, non-different. Avyayam, avyaya, eternal, cannot perish. Ekabhavam, same nature. where one with the sattvic jnana looks at the world and says, underlying this diversity, eka bhava. So straight away, one understands there is equality. Without sattvika jnana, it is impossible to understand what is equality. So we can keep talking about equality, equality, equality. How will we recognize equality if there is no sattvic jnana? So therefore, ekabhavam, avyayam, avibhaktam. Jnana that enables us to discern the fundamental unity. The nature of the Atman is the same in every living entity. The outer diversities do not really matter. The outer diversity keeps changing all the time. Beneath the changing matter, there is an eternal spirit, the Atman. So this jnana is sattvika jnana in nature. So from sattvika jnana, then Krishna moves to, from jnana, Krishna moves to karma. Having established why sattvika jnana matters, then he goes to the very action that is performed, the activity that is performed. Sattvika karma, rajasika karma, tamasika karma. Tamasika karma, actions that are harmful in nature, that are careless, leading to loss and injury. Rajasika karma, typically any action which is ego-driven is rajasika karma, which is rooted in greed. Sattvika karma, when I perform an action as a duty, which means, what is a duty? A duty is where I contribute more than I consume. This is my, in the good old days, even when we, in our professional work that we do, they called it duty, not work. Why? The expectation is the contribution will be more than consumption. Because if everybody works only for consumption, the organization eventually is set for failure. It is not only applicable for a commercial organization, it is applicable for any group. Think of any group. Take even a family. A family, a group, a society, an organization, a team, anything you think of, if the consumption is more than contribution, the group will fail. The only way the group can succeed is when the contribution, that is the reason why work is called duty. And our Shastras go one step further. When the duty is sattvic in nature, it is not sattvika karma, it becomes kainkariya. It goes one step further. So, sattvika karma is duty performed devoid of attachments. Now, jnana, cultivating sattvik jnana is clear. Cultivating sattvik karma is also clear. Now, jnana, karma, karta. Now, we always have this question of where is the entry point? Do we need to necessarily start with cultivating sattvika jnana and then start doing sattvika karma? This is the question. It looks very logical, right? I cultivate sattvika jnana. When there is sattvika jnana, I do sattvika karma. Very logical, obviously. Without sattvika jnana, I cannot do sattvika karma. True. But then if that is the case, why would Krishna separate out karmas and classify it into three groups? What is the need to classify? If sattvika jnana is sattvika karma, rajasika jnana is rajasika karma, tamasika jnana equal to then there is no need. Obviously, Krishna wouldn't be wasting his time explaining sattvika karma on its own and classifying. So, which means to cultivate, again, going back, we need to keep asking this question. Why are we discussing this? Jnana classification, karma classification, karta classification. To cultivate sattva guna, how do we become more and more sattvik? Yes, cultivating sattvika jnana is very clear. Now, what about karma? Is there an entry point through karma? There is an entry point to karma. How? Now, even if I do not have sattvika jnana, can I do sattvika karma? This is a question that all of us need to ask. Can I or can I not? The answer is yes and no. Why no? Because to consistently do sattvika karma, we need to have sattvika jnana. But to one-off sattvika karma, we can always do. We can emulate. I can see somebody and I can emulate that action. Somebody is singing a bhajan which inspires me. A bhajan which inspires me. The singer who is singing the bhajan is actually gone into a deep dhyana, state of dhyana, experiencing Krishna. Now, I can be inspired by that bhajan singer. I may not have the same level of bhakti. I may not have the jnana of Krishna, but I can emulate that singer and start singing the bhajan. The singing Krishna bhajan is a sattvika karma. Now, I can even pretend to start with. I can even start pretending that I love Krishna. And I can start singing. Now, what is going to happen? This, I do it once, I do it twice, I do it thrice. Somewhere, there is going to be a small impact that's going to happen within my mind in the impressions that I'm going to make. And this is going to keep the door between me and Krishna not completely shut. The door is going to slightly open. And when the door gets slightly opened, the ray of light is going to come in slowly. I am in darkness, completely shut my door. I open the door 1 degree. 1 degree is enough for the light to come in, right? I don't need to open the door fully. For light to come into a dark room, I don't need to open it fully. I open it 1 degree, or even a small, tiny hole is enough for light to come in. That is the reason why rituals are prescribed in our Shastra. Sit, have bath, very important, underline. Have bath and do a puja. Have bath and do a puja. No, I mechanically will have a bath. I will come and mechanically do a puja. Next day I do mechanically have a bath. Mechanically I will do a puja. I do it 10 days. 11th day, something is going to happen to me. That transformation is going to happen because anything which is sattvic in nature is going to bring about that. That's the reason why when we are in satsang, many a times, we keep asking this question. The moment we get out of this door, the ego rises. But the moment we are inside, somehow or the other, magically the ego is asleep. Why? Now, it is not because we put in great effort. What will happen? Satsangatve, nitsangatvam, nitsangatve, nirmohatvam. Now, when we are inspired by each other in a satsang, sometimes we start emulating right actions, right karma. And that emulation is good enough as a trigger sometimes. We need to understand. Jnana, karma, karta, 3 are being analyzed because any of them can be a trigger point. Otherwise, what will happen? I will cultivate sattvic jnana over the next 25 years. And then I will start doing right actions. It's like saying, we go and say, please come to satsang. We say, no, first let me get sattvic jnana. Only then I can come to satsang. Coming to satsang itself is karma. Now, this is a sattvika karma. Now, some come voluntarily, some come by force. Some are even dragged. Now, this over a period of time, this sattvika karma, even when it is emulated, is having some transformation. So, same is the case. Similarly, if I do rajasika karma repeatedly, even though I may master the shastras, get sattvika jnana, but if I am in the company of people who are always counting money, if I am in the company, and if everything is talked in terms of money alone, and if I start, doing greedy actions, this is eventually going to have an impact on, even though I have accumulated jnana over a period of time, it's not going to have a transformatory impact, because the Rajasic karma that I do will also have an impact eventually. See, all are integrate, all complement each other. So therefore, this is also an entry point. That is why Krishna specifically focuses on this particular actor in an action, the karma itself. Tamasa karma. Krishna clearly, gives a beautiful adjective. Mohad arabhate. He says, simple, finished. Once we know what is mohad arabhate, we know what is mohad, or any action that is performed in a state of delusion. Mohad. What is the state of delusion? The state of delusion is that if I do anything for this body, I will be happy. Isn't that delusion? That is delusion. So any action that I do, hoping that I will make myself happy by catering to gratifying my senses. Mohādarabhate. Without any, this is key, without any consideration for consequences, without any consideration for loss, injury, capacity. Good examples, a drunkard. A drunkard has no consequence or no consideration for any consequences. Consequences for his health or his family's health. Consequences for society's well-being. Mohādarabhate. I live today, I enjoy today. As though, this is the motto, right? So that is tamasa karma. Rajasic karma, kamepsuna, sahankarena, bahulayasam. Now, this should clearly tell us any action that we do, whether it is Rajasic or not. We all ask this question. How can I say the actions that I do in a day are Rajasic or not? If I get easily stressed, if I get easily tired, then which means I have been doing Rajasic actions. Throughout the day, I work for 18 hours. If the actions are sattvic, I am still at the same level as I was right at the time of the beginning of the day. A Rajasic action, a sattvic action will conserve energy. Rajasic action will deplete energy. So after a few hours of work, I need a break. Whereas sattvic, what is the break? I'm connected with Krishna. He's giving me the energy. I don't need a break. I'm on the top of, whatever I do. So, bahulayas, getting stressed, getting easily worn out, tired, sahankari. Why? Because of the stress is because of my ego. Everything that I do is because of my ego. Kameps, desire thought action. This is very easy for us. So, if we have to reflect whether my actions are Rajasic or not. What was the desire that drove me this action? Clear. Every action, if we take one sheet and write the actions, what prompted and put a desire behind that, we know whether it is Rajasic or not Rajasic. Straightforward. So therefore, Krishna, while analyzing karma, he gives this very important message. Work is not meant to be functional. The work that we do, unfortunately, everything in the society is designed, our education system, whatever we learn, all the tools that we have is to make our work functional. How do we succeed working functionally? Whereas work that we do has to be transformation. Inner transformation. Any work that I do, if the work becomes a duty, and if the duty becomes a service, then there's a transformation happening in my mind all the time. So that is why cultivation of sattva becomes so very important. With sattva, it is no longer functional, it is transformation. And we will see what this transformation actually means to us. Our work that we do normally defines our identity, isn't it? why this karma is so very important, Krishna analyzes, because without realizing, we always identify ourselves with the work that we do. Whatever be the work, at whatever stage we are in, the kind of work that we do. That is why all this, when the reason why I'm summarizing all this is because when we go to Varna Dharma, all this plays a very important role there. Why it defines our identity, depending on our occupation, our identity also keeps changing. If in the good old days, occupation was static, identities were static, and one grows up in this life, growing up with a very fixed identity which never changes. If one is born as a son of a butcher, occupation is butcher. The butchery is the occupation, right? Now, one's identity is strongly linked to that occupation. If one is a farmer, one's identity is strongly linked. So, even if you take in the modern world, whatever kind of duty that we do, whatever kind of work that we do at home or outside, our identity is shaped by the nature of work. So therefore, if the work that we do is binding in nature, our identity also, we are always in a state of misidentification all the time. And therefore, we need to realize that we are more than our work. Unfortunately, it possibly takes one, maybe, time of retirement. Suddenly realize, oh, my work, I'm more than my work. It hits. For some people it may hit. For some people, maybe it may not. Because one keeps running throughout one's life and one reaches a stage, 60 plus, and then says, now possibly there is something which is missing in my life. Maybe I'm more than my work. This day, I've been doing a particular type of work for 40 years, let's say. Let's say I'm an accountant and I have been doing this accountancy work from the age of 20 to age of 60. I will think I'm an accountant, right? I'm very comfortable, debit, credit, calculation, everything I do, I walk, I breathe, I think, I analyze everything from an accountant. The moment I stop, suddenly, and then one will realize, okay, now that I retired, let me do some good work. I will go to an ashram and I will become an accountant in the ashram. So it's very difficult to, this identity becomes so very strong. So the earlier we realize, especially the children out here, that we are more than the work that we do. So that is when right actions will come. So therefore, Sattvika karma, Krishna again uses some very interesting adjectives that we need to. We'll go from the down on. Aphala prepsuna. Aphala prepsuna. Obviously, this is the very heart of Karma Yoga. Those of us who have traveled all the way to 18th chapter, at this point in time, should not ask why we should not have expectation of fruit, but we can always discuss. How so many number of times after 18th chapter, we are going to go back to first chapter, of course, right? But at least conceptually, aphala prepsuna, not hankering for the fruits of one's action. Araga dvesha kritam. Raga dvesha, two forces which always prevent us from doing right actions. Raga, these are like two ropes tied to us, always pulling us back, all the time pulling us back. Araga, cutting those ropes of raga, and raga is attachment, dvesha is hatred. Right? So, sangarahitam, sangarahita. Sangha, the attachment to doership, specifically, because aphala prepsuna's attachment to fruits, sangarahita's attachment to doership. Niyatam, this is the interesting part. Sattvika, niyatam, ordained work. So even if that's why I said, even if we have not cultivated a lot of sattvika jnana, niyata karma can be done. Niyata karma is the karma which Shastras prescribe. Do this, don't do this, do it this way, all this. And we have 100 questions on why we should be doing. And in that process, we will end up not doing them. And when we do not do them, then we are losing out a very important entry point. This is the significance of rituals, significance of festivals, significance of all the samskaras. We do not understand until we really look at this different, the facets of every action. So this is importance of sattvika karma. Then Krishna comes to the third actor, the real actor. Who is the real actor? Karta. Who is this Karta? The Atman. Who is the Karta? The Jivatma is a Karta, is also a Karta, is a Bhokta, is also not Bhokta. Why? We have seen this. He is Karta because he has his will. He has a free will. He is a Akarta because ultimately the scope of the free will is very limited. But the Karta makes the choices. We have the unique faculty to make choices. So therefore, a Sattvika Karta is one who is selfless, in the sense, when we say selfless, we discussed this many times. This English translation of self for Atman is the worst definition that could have ever been given. Everywhere, especially when you study the Upanishads, they will confuse you a lot, because everywhere self will be written for Atman, and Paramatman super self will be written. No, what is this self? No, this idea of self is so very misleading. And when we say selfless, it's even more misleading. Selfish is also misleading. So, when the English word selfless means being less body conscious, let's put it that way. The more we are aware that I am much more than my body. It is not just I'm not the body, I'm much more than this body. And the Sattvika Karta, therefore, also has a mind which is calm, balanced, and which can then take the right decisions. Now, a Rajasic Karta, on the other hand, is always oscillating all the time. And because of greed, he's always seeking results, seeking rewards. Rewards come first. Results come first. Always attached. A Tamasic Karta, obviously, is one who is procrastinating, lazy, perverse, with a completely inverted perspective. Now, Krishna takes these three, and to a large extent, it now becomes clear that all these three, jnana, karma, karta, they can be of three different types. And our objective of cultivating sattva, we can look at all these three. In each of these, we can see how we can bring in the element of sattva. But there is still something missing here. What is that which is missing? Now, between what is perceived, the process of perception and action, there is something which is going on. Now, I perceive and then I act. But then, before I act and after I perceive, there are certain things that need to happen. How should I act? How should I not act? What should I do? Therefore, Krishna then says, in order to answer these questions, we need to expand this a little bit more. He says, jnana, karta, karma, but the karta, we need to zoom in a little bit more. Karta at a high level is easy to understand, but let us zoom in a little bit more. The karta incidentally has two important faculties. The karta has something called buddhi. The karta has something called dhriti. Now, If the karta has to be sattvic karta, then we need to look at how his dhriti has to be sattvic and his buddhi has to be sattvic. If his dhriti and buddhi are not sattvic, if they are rajasic, the karta will become rajasic karta. So therefore, Krishna zooms in a little bit into karta and says, let's take up the next two components to understand and then analyze them. Buddhi, dhriti. Buddhi is that faculty to discriminate. Because I perceive, before I act, I have to discriminate whether I should do, not do. How should I do? Good and bad, right and wrong. So this is where buddhi comes in, discrimination. Also, jnana will help in setting the goal. Jnana will shape the desire, but the desire, the goal, has to then translate into a plan that needs to be executed. For that, discrimination is important. And this is where buddhi comes in. On the other hand, you perceive something, you process, you decide how to act, and you act. Now, to act, there are so many inducements. We said desire is an inducer. Now, if there is only one desire, life is so easy. If there are 100 desires, what will happen? Now, that is one. After a desire is chosen, it is not as though we make a choice and then the rest of the 99 desires will go to sleep. It is not only I choose a desire, I also need to ensure that after I choose a desire and I start executing that particular desire, other desires should not stop me from pursuing the desire. In an ideal world, yes, out of 100, I choose one, the rest go to sleep, and then I'm very happy. But unfortunately, all the other 99 desires, after they are not chosen, becomes even more hyperactive. And they become a source of distraction for us. So therefore, dhriti brings an order to desires. Dhriti brings focus to desires. Dhriti will ensure that we can persevere in our execution. Without dhriti, there is no perseverance. So Krishna then therefore says, to understand the karta a little bit more, two more factors he brings in. Buddhi, dhriti. And then he says there are three types of buddhi. Sattvika buddhi, rajasika buddhi, and tamasika buddhi. And it is very clear. Sattvika buddhi. Sattvika buddhi helps us to discriminate between abhyudaya and nishreyasa. Karya versus akarya. Bhaya versus abhaya. Bandham versus moksha. Abhyudaya is material progress. Nishreyasa is spiritual progress. Karya, what is to be done. Akarya, what is to be not done, what is to be avoided. Bhaya, what is to be feared. Abhaya, what is not to be feared. We saw this very clearly. Sattvika buddhi helps us to discriminate between unhealthy fears and healthy fears. There is no state where we can say fearlessness 100%. All of us need to have some fears, some healthy fears. Just like how a child needs to have fear of not jumping from the balcony. That is a healthy fear. We also have to have a healthy fear of staying in samsara forever. So, healthy fear versus unhealthy fear is very, very important. So, bhaya, bandham, moksha, bondage and liberation. If there is no sattvika buddhi, there is no discussion on moksha at all. 90% possibly will ask, what is moksha? What is the need for moksha? I am happy today. Why should I even bother about what I will be after I die? Because the perspective of the cycle of life and birth is not there. So Sattvika Buddhi gives that discrimination. Rajasic Buddhi cannot discriminate between adharma and dharma. Impulse, temptation versus need. When there is Rajasic Buddhi, everything is need. I'm desperate for everything. I cannot differentiate between just another impulse or anything which comes to my eyes becomes a desperate, not a need, desperate want. I want, it becomes a need eventually. Adharma versus dharma. What is virtue? What is vice? I cannot discriminate. In case of tamasic buddhi, It's not about me not able to discriminate. Adharma is equal to dharma, which is what is ignorance of ignorance. Illusion of tamas not only covers completely, it also covers the pathway out of darkness. So there is no exit. So it's completely dark, the room is dark, and the pathway out of the room is also dark. So there is no way to come out of it. That is the tamasic buddhi. And then we come to dhriti. 3 types of dhriti Krishna discussed: sattvika dhriti, rajasika dhriti, tamasika dhriti. With sattvika dhriti, we get to focus on what is priority, which is Krishna. Rajasic dhriti, the mind is oscillating. So we are completely distracted all the time and we are chasing one after the other. Tamasic dhriti is complete forgetfulness, lethargy, and sleep. So, in conclusion, why is Krishna taking up this art and science of actions? Because 3 important things. Spiritual progress is all about recognizing and realizing our right identity, doing right actions, and ultimately reaching the right destination. This is so therefore, when we look now at the important actors of any action, we have jnana, we have karma, we have buddhi, we have dhriti, and we have karta. The karta, the one at the center, now the karta is the self. Now, typically, all of us operate not based on the awareness that we are the Atman. We operate based on the awareness of what we think we are. We all have our own conception of who we are. That is what we can call as self-image. It is not the self, it is a self-image. It is the self-image which essentially is the definition for our identity. Now, the self-image is totally different to the self. The self-image is totally different to the self. The self is the Atman. The self-image is everything which is what we give a definition. Now, the reason why we need to cultivate sattva, sattvika jnana, sattvika karma, sattvika buddhi, sattvika dhriti, the reason is as we cultivate sattva, the self of which is who we are, and the self-image, who we think we are, will come closer and closer and closer. To begin with, there is a huge difference between who we are and who we think we are. As we cultivate sattva across all the factors, there seems to be some convergence. Who we think we are slowly changes, and we start. Gita says we are the Atman. No, I am the Atman. Still, it is at a conceptual level. Still, it is only remaining at the level of knowledge only. But then, as we do sattvika karma with the sattvika jnana, because knowing and doing, has to keep going on and on and on and on and on. Initially, it may be just theoretical knowledge. No problem. Initially, I am the Atman, I am the Atman, I am the Atman. It's a very theoretical knowledge. But I am the Atman, that awareness has to translate into the action that I do. And when the action that I do is based on the awareness of me being the Atman, that will reinforce my understanding of who I am. So therefore, what I think who I am and who I am will start to converge, which is what we call as self-realization. Self-realization is the path where the gap between who I am and who I think I am keeps coming down, closer, closer, closer. eventually the self-image becomes. This is what is self-realization. Self-realization is when jnana is sattvic, buddhi is sattvic, karma is sattvic, vritti is sattvic, and we are clear about our identity. Then every action is a liberating action. And when the identity is clear, actions are liberating, destination is also clear. So this prepares us for the next segment of the Gita, because swakarma parinamascha, transformation of our karma, leading into Krishna's varna dharma. The next 3 weeks, we will focus on varna dharma. We will take from here. In fact, the reason why Krishna analyzes action into these components is actually a foundation for varna dharma. So we will build on this and we will dive into varna dharma. Until then, let's continue to contemplate on what is the right action and how cultivating sattva helps us to do the right action. Sarvam Sri Krishna.